Thanksgiving. My dad announced, "We're selling the family business. You're getting nothing." My siblings cheered. I smiled. "Dad, who's the buyer?" He proudly said, "Everest Holdings. They're paying $50 million." I laughed. "Dad, I am Everest Holdings." The room went silent. My name is Morgan Adams. I'm 32, the middle child of the Adams software family, the one everyone forgets. I arrived at our Boston mansion for Thanksgiving and noticed Dad glued to his phone, whispering with Mom, unusually excited. Under a simple black dress, I wore the patience and resolve they'd always underestimated. The announcement Dad planned for dinner would change everything, just not in the way he expected. If you're watching from a family business, drop a comment and subscribe to see how I turned my father's betrayal into the cleanest kind of revenge. I grew up in Brooklyn, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, in a sprawling colonial 6 bedrooms, an indoor heated pool, a lawn that took 3 gardeners. From the outside, we were the classic American success story. My grandfather, Robert Adams, started Adams Software Solutions in his garage in 1978 with a second-hand computer and an idea for inventory management software. He scaled it into a regional leader, and in 1995 my father, Harold Adams, took over. Dad expanded aggressively. Under him, Adams Software grew from a $10 million family shop to a $50 million company with over 200 employees and national clients. Holidays, vacations, even backyard barbecues inevitably became celebrations of his business acumen. The Adams name was synonymous with success in Boston, and Dad made sure everyone remembered it, especially his children. There are 3 Adams kids. Garrett, 38, was the golden child. He had no real aptitude for the business, majored in communications, partied through college, yet Dad handed him a vice president role the day after graduation. Garrett spent more time on his boat or with a revolving door of girlfriends than in the office. But Dad stayed convinced he was the natural heir. Then there's me, Morgan, perpetually in the middle at 32. I inherited my grandfather's love for technology. I taught myself to code at 12, built my first app at 15, and studied computer science and business at MIT, graduating summa cum laude. I had real ideas to modernize the company. Still, Dad treated me as if I were invisible during business conversations. My younger sister, Megan, 29, used the family name to build a lifestyle influencer career with hundreds of thousands of followers, curated glimpses of old money New England life. She never cared about software or operations, but never missed a chance to post from Adams' offices while contributing little to the company's success. Mom, Diane, came from old Boston money and handled family conflict the Beacon Hill way: ignore it and pour another glass of Chardonnay. She played peacemaker but often enabled Dad's worst behavior, especially when he dismissed my business ideas. "Harold, maybe you should listen to Morgan's idea," she'd suggest sometimes, then back down once he shot her that look. "Diane, please, this is real business," he'd say, before turning back to Garrett to continue a conversation about golf, yachts, or whatever non-business topic they preferred. Family gatherings always revolved around business talk that excluded me. Dad and Garrett dominated conversations with jargon and inside jokes while I sat silent, despite understanding the tech and market better than either of them. If I tried to speak, Dad would smile condescendingly and say, "That's sweet, Morgan. Leave the business talk to people who understand the real world." The breaking point came at 22. Fresh out of MIT, I'd developed a cloud-based integration solution that could have modernized our product line years before competitors entered the space. I spent months on a business plan, market analysis, and technical specs. Dad agreed to let me pitch during a board meeting as a courtesy. I still remember the mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop and slides in hand, heart racing. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch, sighed, and stopped me mid-sentence. "I think we've seen enough," he said with a tight smile. "Morgan's sweet idea, creative, but impractical for a serious company. Our clients want stability, not experiments." He turned to the board with an apologetic shrug. My daughter just graduated college and is full of academic ideas. Shall we move on to actual business matters? They chuckled and moved on as if I'd never been there. Humiliated, I packed up and walked out. That night, I made a decision. I would leave Boston and build something of my own. Something so successful Dad couldn't ignore. I moved to San Francisco with $5,000 and nothing else. My parents thought it was a tantrum. She'll be back when she runs out of money. I overheard Dad tell Mom. The early years were brutal. A tiny studio, ramen, long nights, 80-hour weeks doing entry-level coding jobs, freelancing and reinvesting every spare dollar. I created Everest Holdings under the pseudonym Emmy Stone, the initials for Morgan Elizabeth, because I wanted my success to stand on its own, apart from the Adams name. I started small, making custom enterprise solutions for startups. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a Soma office. The breakthrough came when I built a proprietary integration platform, letting legacy systems talk to modern cloud services. Ironically, the same idea I'd pitched years earlier. Venture capital called, but I kept majority ownership to control my destiny. Over the next 7 years, I acquired complementary tech firms. Everest grew to a $200 million valuation, with offices in 3 cities. I kept the Emmy Stone identity in public, a brilliant, reclusive founder who rarely did interviews. When I had to appear, I altered my look and let my COO handle most public speaking. My family had no idea. At home, during calls and rare visits, I kept explanations vague, doing okay, still figuring things out. Dad assumed my career was inconsequential, perfect, while they assumed I was quietly buying shares in companies that supplied or serviced Adams software. I read quarterly reports, watched weaknesses, and positioned Everest as the ideal buyer to modernize Adams. 6 months earlier, I'd even had my CFO submit an anonymous acquisition offer via a third party, which Dad predictably rejected without proper review. Now, 10 years after being shut down in that boardroom, I was coming home for Thanksgiving with a plan. Adams Software was struggling with aging tech and slippage in market share. My father didn't know that I was poised to be both his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in my corner office, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, finalizing paperwork for the deal. My assistant handed me my travel itinerary. Private jet confirmed for Tuesday at 11 a.m., she said. Do you want your executive team to come to Boston for the signing? I shook my head. This is personal. I'm handling it alone. After she left, my phone rang. Isabella, the friend who'd helped me survive those early years in adjacent studio apartments, are you really going through with this family Thanksgiving charade? She asked. After years of barely speaking with them, I told her, I need to be there in person. I want to see his face. Isabella reminded me of the last Christmas, when Dad promoted Garrett while my Series B funding was ignored. The memory stung. This time would be different. I promised it would. I packed deliberately, no casual clothes this visit. Money suits, a Chanel dress for dinner, Louis Vuitton heels, subtle markers of success the family would recognize. A Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, small Tiffany diamond studs, not flashy, unmistakably expensive. After years of downplaying my success, I wanted them to notice before the reveal. Tuesday morning, I boarded a private jet I hardly used. During the 5-hour flight, I reviewed the contract. Every detail ironed out. The jet landed at a private airfield outside Boston. A black Bentley met me on the tarmac. As we drove through neighborhood after familiar neighborhood toward Brooklyn, I felt nostalgia mixed with resolve. The Adams estate looked unchanged. Imposing colonial manicured grounds dusted with November snow, a wreath on the door for the season. I had the driver wait and climbed the steps I'd taken 1,000 times. Mom answered the door herself, bypassing the housekeeper in her eagerness to see me. Her eyes widened slightly at my appearance. Morgan, darling, she said, hugging me with the scent of expensive perfume and a faint wine note. You look different. Is that a Rolex? Patek Philippe, actually, I replied, returning the hug. She chattered about Thanksgiving, and Megan's latest Instagram milestone, as she ushered me in. I set my bag down in the grand foyer, a place full of complicated memories. Mom said Dad was in his study, very busy with some big deal. Hush hush, even with me. I smiled and went to say hello before settling in. Dad's study had always felt off limits. Leather, mahogany, business journals. I knocked and entered without waiting, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering before settling into mild disinterest. "Morgan, you made it." He stood for an awkward hug and motioned to a chair. Trip from California was smooth. I deliberately didn't sit. I flew private, saves time. Confusion crossed his face. Private? That must have been expensive. Business is good, I said. His phone rang. While he answered, I glimpsed the papers on his desk. The Everest Holdings acquisition proposal, with my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I stayed composed. When he finished the call, he gathered the papers. "Big things happening," he said. "You wouldn't understand." The familiar dismissal slid off me. "Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it," I said, and left. Upstairs, my old bedroom was preserved as a shrine to my teens. Debate trophies, computer science awards, MIT pennants, dusty reminders of achievements that never impressed the person whose approval I wanted most. I freshened up and went downstairs, where Garrett was already drinking scotch at 3 p.m., looking like Dad but softened by privilege. Well, the prodigal sister returns," he said, raising his glass. "Still playing with computers in California?" "Something like that," I replied tightly. "How's your little startup? Making any money yet?" His condescension was familiar. Megan burst in, phone out, capturing her entrance. "Morgan's here, everyone. Family reunion time." She air-kissed me and commented, "You look expensive, sis. Did you find a rich boyfriend?" "No, just working hard," I said, moving out of her camera frame. Garrett introduced his new girlfriend, Amber, who was filming as well. "Amber, this is Morgan. She lives in San Francisco and does tech stuff," he said, dismissing a decade of my accomplishments with a vague wave. Amber gushed about shopping in San Francisco. Our awkward small talk was interrupted by Dad's voice from his study, loud and excited. "Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Thanksgiving, $50 million final. Everest Holdings insists on the terms." I excused myself to the kitchen. The household staff had always been kinder than my family. Maria, our housekeeper of 20 years, was preparing vegetables. "Miss Morgan, good to see you. California agrees with you." "Thanks, Maria. Need any help?" She shook her head. "Your mother wants everything perfect. Big day tomorrow, your father has news." I wondered if the staff knew about the sale before his children. Pre-dinner drinks were excruciating. Mom fluttered with forced cheer. Dad checked his phone constantly. Garrett bragged about his boat. Megan documented everything for followers. I sipped wine and watched the dynamics with new eyes. No longer the hurt daughter seeking validation, but a businesswoman about to change the game. Dinner was called. The formal dining room, that same mahogany table, with Wedgwood china and silver candelabras, had us seated in the family order. I found myself at the far end of the table, as distant from Dad as possible. Garrett sat at Dad's right, with Amber, Megan at his left. Mom sat opposite at the traditional head swap, and I took my place, symbolically set apart by polished wood. Courses came: butternut squash soup with creme fraiche, a harvest salad with candied walnuts and cranberries, and a 25-pound turkey roasted to golden perfection. Dad carved with ceremonial precision, while Megan narrated for Instagram, and here is Daddy carving the turkey, just like his father before him, continuing the Addams tradition of excellence. I caught Mom wince and take another sip of wine. The Addams family gratitude ritual followed, a round where each of us shared what we were thankful for. It had once held meaning, now it felt like a competitive status update. Garrett, as oldest, went first. "I'm thankful for another record-breaking quarter at Addams Software," he began, while I privately knew from my research the company had lost market share for the third quarter in a row. "And for my new 42-foot yacht, The Adams legacy, he added, squeezing Amber's hand. Amber kissed him. Megan made exaggerated gagging faces when he wasn't looking. Megan went next, phone still in hand. I'm so thankful to have reached 1 million followers this year. My collab with Luxury Life Cosmetics has been amazing, and I'm proud to represent the Addams family brand. She beamed at Dad. He nodded, though privately he'd complained about her frivolous career. When my turn came, I set down my fork and spoke plainly. I'm thankful for the lessons life has taught me, that rejection can redirect you, persistence often matters more than privilege, and that success is the best teacher. I raised my glass to finding your own way. Dad's brow tightened for a moment, as if he sensed something, then he moved on to his usual gratitude about the legacy he'd built. Mom offered a weary thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred. Throughout the meal, Dad seemed distracted, checking his phone under the table and whispering to Mom, whose smile grew strained. Garrett monopolized conversation with stories of clients he'd allegedly impressed, while Megan interrupted to read followers' comments on her Thanksgiving story. When Maria brought dessert, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass. The sound cut through the chatter. I have an announcement, he said, standing at the head of the table with the practiced authority of a patriarch. The room fell quiet. Even Megan lowered her phone. As you know, I dedicated my life to building Addams software. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change. He paused. I have decided to sell the company. Garrett choked on his wine. What? You can't be serious. Dad raised a hand for silence. I've been negotiating with a buyer for months. The deal will be finalized tomorrow. Megan gasped dramatically. But Daddy, what about the Addams legacy? My brand depends on being an Addams. Dad continued, expression unreadable. The proceeds will not be going to you children as inheritance. Garrett and Megan erupted. That's our birthright. Garrett slammed his fist, rattling the china. Megan, live streaming, wailed into her camera. Where's the money going? Dad waited for them to calm. Your mother and I will use part of it for our retirement. The rest will fund the Addams Foundation to support technology education. Garrett stood, face flushed. I've given 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine. Megan cried with tears streaming, though she angled her phone to get the best shot. Through the chaos, I remained calm, taking measured bites of pecan pie. Mom noticed, and gave me a puzzled look. Morgan, she said quietly. You don't seem surprised. The room turned toward me, remembering I was there. Actually, I said, putting down my fork neatly. I have one question. I looked at my father. Who is the buyer? Dad's chest swelled with pride at having big news. A very successful tech investment firm. EVEREST Holdings. They're paying $50 million. I took a sip of water and steadied myself. The air in the room changed. Something electric hung between past and future. Dad, I said, calm and steady. I am EVEREST Holdings. Silence slammed into the room. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking. For a long beat, no one moved. I watched Dad's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, shock, then the first flashes of anger. Garrett was first to react, knocking over his wine as he rose. Red spread across the tablecloth, like punctuation. What are you talking about? He demanded. Panic rising. Megan, still live streaming with trembling hands, whispered into her phone. Did my sister say she owns EVEREST Holdings, the company buying our family business? Mom reached for her wine, and finding the glass empty, grabbed the bottle. I stood, feeling calm after carrying the secret so long. Emmy Stone, I said. I'm Morgan Elizabeth Stone, the name I used professionally for the past decade while I built EVEREST Holdings into a $200 million company. Dad sputtered that it was impossible. EVEREST Holdings is run by Emmy Stone, a respected investor, not by my daughter, who's been dabbling in startups in California. I reached into my purse, pulled out a brushed platinum business card case with the Everest logo, and slid a card across the table. Dad, I am Emmy Stone. I founded Everest 10 years ago, after you dismissed my proposal and humiliated me in front of your board. He snatched up the card, staring as if it might change form. "This is a joke," he said, but his certainty had cracked. I continued, "Everest now holds controlling interests in Nexus Technologies, Data Stream Solutions, and Tech Core Industries, three of Atom's biggest suppliers. We also hold majority stakes in two of your largest clients, McKinsey Manufacturing and Westfield Distribution." Acquiring Atom's software was the final step in a strategic plan I'd executed over the last 18 months. "You've been spying on us," Garrett accused, rage painted on his face. "That's corporate espionage," I corrected him. "No, it's market research. Everything I used was from public financial reports, industry analysis, and legal channels." I looked at Dad. "The truth is Atom's software has been failing. Your tech is outdated, management is stuck in old ways, and you've lost 22% market share in 3 years." Dad began to object, but I cut in. "I tried to help. 6 months ago, Everest sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have kept the Atoms name while providing capital and upgrades. You rejected it without reading beyond the first page." Dad's eyes widened in recognition. "The Phoenix proposal, that was you." I nodded. "I wanted to give you a chance to accept help without knowing it came from me. Your pride wouldn't let it." "You plotted against your family?" Garrett shouted. "You planned to steal our company." The accusation hung in the air. I kept my voice even. "Let's be clear, this stopped being our family business the day you made it obvious. Only one child would ever have a meaningful role, despite that child's lack of qualifications." Megan finally lowered her phone. The reality was settling in. "So you're going to be our boss now?" she asked, softly. "Technically, yes," I said. "But the management structure will be reorganized." Dad stood abruptly. "This deal is off," he declared. "I will not sell my company to my daughter as a revenge plot." I shook my head. "The contracts are signed. The board approved the sale. Legally, Everest already owns Atom's software. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern." He threatened to fight it. His uncertainty betrayed him. "Your lawyers have vetted it. They said it's the best offer in the current market," I added gently. Mom spoke for the first time since the reveal. Slurred but oddly clear-eyed. "All these years, Morgan, you were building this while we thought." I finished for her. "Yes." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You can be my daughter or the person who took my company. You can't be both." The ultimatum was predictable, and 10 years ago would have crushed me. Now it only confirmed what I'd known. "That's where you're wrong, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it." Megan cried harder, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What happens to our trust funds, our positions?" she demanded. "That depends," I answered honestly, "on whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits." Garrett pointed at me, furious. "You planned this for Thanksgiving to humiliate us." I corrected him. "I planned it for Thanksgiving because I knew everyone would be present. And because 10 years ago at Thanksgiving you were promoted despite lacking qualifications, while I, with an MIT degree and years of coding, was denied a single management role." Dad flushed. "That was different. Garrett is my son, my firstborn," he said. "There it is," I replied softly. "The real reason I was never given a chance wasn't my ideas, education, or work ethic. It was my gender." That painful truth quieted the room. Even Garrett looked uncomfortable. "This conversation is over," Dad finally declared. "Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys." He stormed from the dining room. The study doors slammed. Mom rose unsteadily. "I should check on him," she murmured, pausing at my chair. "Are you really worth $200 million? I nodded. "And all those times I couldn't come home for Christmas, because I couldn't afford the plane ticket. I was building a company, Mom." She touched my shoulder briefly, expression unreadable, then followed Dad. As the dining room emptied, I stayed seated, taking in the abandoned feast. The turkey cooled. The candles burned low, and the family I'd once wanted to impress had scattered in shock and anger. It should have felt like victory. Instead, there was a hollow ache. I'd won their attention but not their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, while the house descended into chaos. Below, Dad shouted into phones, likely his lawyers. Mom's placating voice rose and fell. Garrett's anger and Megan's wailing punctuated the noise. My old room was frozen in time, a twin bed with a navy comforter, the desk where I coded and mapped ideas, bookshelves of CS texts, and a few fantasy novels. Debate trophies and medals gathered dust, trophies that never meant much to the one approval I'd sought. I pulled out a journal at random. Business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the cloud integration that became EVEREST's flagship product. The irony, everything I built started in the room where I'd felt most invisible. A sharp knock interrupted me. I opened the door to find Garrett, tie loosened, face flushed. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past without waiting. I closed the door and crossed my arms. "About what? How I ruined your Thanksgiving? Or about how you planned to inherit a company you ran into the ground?" He sneered, pacing like a caged animal. "You think you're clever?" he hissed. "Little Morgan with her computers and secret identity. Did you enjoy lying to us?" "About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas," I replied. "Remember when I suggested moving Adam's software to the cloud 6 years ago at Christmas? Dad dismissed it as trendy jargon. 3 months later, you presented the same idea as your strategic vision." Garrett stopped pacing, his expression dark. "I stayed. I put in time," he said. "What did you do? Run off to California?" "You put in time," I agreed, "but what did you actually contribute? Besides charges on the company card for client dinners at strip clubs and a corner office used mostly for naps." His face contorted. "You don't know what you're talking about. I brought in Westfield. I told him I'd contacted Westfield's CTO as Emmy Stone and recommended Adams as part of a long-term acquisition strategy. I know what I'm talking about," I said. "I audited the company remotely during due diligence, including financial records you thought were secured on the local server." Color drained from his face. "What are you saying?" he whispered. "I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts. I know about phantom consulting fees going to your offshore account. I know everything." He stepped toward me. "You can't prove that." I had transaction records, account numbers, and IP logs showing falsified entries from his office computer on days only he was present. I held my gaze. "I won't pursue criminal charges. That would hurt the company during the transition, but don't test me." He clenched his fists. "You'd destroy your brother." "I'd hold a thief accountable even if he's family," I corrected. We stood in tense silence until he turned away and spat, "This is not over," before yanking open the door. "Actually it is," I said quietly as his footsteps receded. I barely had the door closed when Megan appeared, makeup touched up despite tear tracks. "So you were a secret millionaire," she said, sitting on my bed. "That's kind of badass." I smiled despite myself at her quick pivot. "Is that what you were doing 5 minutes ago, crying about losing status?" She shrugged, checking her manicure. "I'm adaptable. It's key for influencers." She sat up, calculating. "Think of the content we could make together. Sister the tech mogul. My followers would eat it up." "You need a media presence that humanizes you." "I need real business cred." Her blunt transactional pitch was very mega. "And what about actually working for the company? Learning it, contributing beyond aesthetics?" I asked. She wrinkled her nose. "God, no. Coding bores me and meetings make me want to die. I could be the brand ambassador, the lifestyle face for an enterprise platform," I repeated slowly. "Do you hear yourself?" She straightened. "Fine. Mock me. But social media skills are valuable. I built my brand from nothing too." For a moment the parallel struck me. Different methods. Same ambition. "I'll think about it," I said, "but not tonight." She smiled, satisfied with that small concession. "Oh, and I already posted about a major family business shakeup, engagements through the roof." After she left, I opened my laptop to check final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock came. "Come in," I called, expecting Maria with tea. Instead, Mom entered, looking sober, despite dinner. She'd changed into cashmere and slacks, temporarily dropping her social armor. Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws, she said, settling into the window seat where she once read me stories. He's convinced there must be a loophole to stop the sale. There isn't, I said simply. His lawyers already confirmed it. She looked around my old room thoughtfully. You know, I kept everything exactly as you left it. I always thought you'd come back once you'd gotten your rebellion out of your system. It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was a career. A life. $200 million. She shook her head, a small, stunned smile forming. My little girl built a $200 million company in secret, while we thought you were struggling. I turned fully to her. Any of you could have asked, I said. You could have shown real interest in what I was building. None of you did. Tears filled her eyes. I knew you were special, she whispered. Not the details, not the scale, but I saw how your mind worked differently when you were little. I didn't know how to help in a family like ours with a man like your father. She wiped her cheek. I thought I was keeping the peace. I failed to be your advocate. Her quiet admission hit harder than I expected. I had come ready for anger, accusations or legal threats, not for sincere remorse. After a long pause, she asked, "What happens now?" I explained, "Tomorrow morning the acquisition becomes public. Adams Software will be a subsidiary of Everest Holdings. The Adams name will remain for now, but operations will be reorganized." I hesitated, then added that Dad and Garrett would be offered advisory, non-operational roles, if they wished, largely ceremonial during the transition. "Will you move back to Boston?" she asked. I shook my head. "I'll stay in San Francisco. We'll install a new management team here." She nodded, understanding what I wouldn't say. I had outgrown this version of family and home. "Your father may never forgive you," she warned softly. "I know," I answered. "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about finally being seen." After she left, I worked through the night preparing for the morning. Text from Isabella asking for updates went unanswered. At first light, I dressed in an Armani suit, fixed my hair into a sleek style, and applied the subtle makeup Emmy Stone used for rare public appearances. Morning would either start a new chapter for the Addams family or finish it. Either way, I was ready. The kitchen was quiet at 7 a.m. Maria handed me coffee without a word, her expression a mix of concern and respect. The dining room had been cleared. The house still smelled faintly of last night's tension. I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from my executive team about the 9 a.m. announcement, and a text from Isabella, "Did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing?" I was replying when Dad appeared at the kitchen doorway. Older, haggard, clearly sleepless. "My study now," he said, leaving no room for debate. We walked to his study, the room lined with framed accolades and magazine covers. Notably absent was any acknowledgement of my accomplishments, though my MIT photo sat half hidden on a side table. He took his usual seat behind the heavy desk. I didn't sit in the visitor's chair. Instead, I perched on the desk edge, a small shift in the room's power balance. "My attorneys confirm what you said last night," he began. "The sale is binding. The board vote was unanimous." "Of course," I replied. "Adams Software had been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is behind, your management is bloated, and your development pipeline is thin." The board recognized a solid offer. $50 million, he said, shaking his head. "The company was $70 million 2 years ago." I corrected him. "It was overvalued then, and I offered more than any other buyer likely would. Many buyers would have stripped assets and dissolved the brand entirely." "Is that your plan to erase the family legacy?" he asked. "No," I said. "I respect what grandfather built and what you expanded. The Adams name stays, but the structure will change." For the first time in years, he asked a real business question. "What exactly are your plans?" I explained that Adams Software would become Everest's enterprise division, focused on modernizing legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We'd retain roughly 60% of staff, but upper management would change. I told him he'd be offered a chairman emeritus role, office, advisory capacity, no operational power, with full benefits and generous compensation. He stood and walked to the window, staring at the gardens. How did you do it? He asked quietly. You built something that valuable from nothing. No connections, no capital. I reminded him of the one thing he couldn't take from me, my education and the drive to prove myself. He admitted he'd expected me to fail. 90% of startups don't make it past 3 years, he said hesitantly, and that he'd thought he was protecting me by keeping me from trying. That wasn't protection, I told him. That was control. He flinched at the word. Perhaps I expanded what my father started. I thought I knew best. You didn't, I said simply. You were wrong about me, about the industry's direction, and about Garrett as successor. At that, his face darkened. I told him bluntly that Garrett had been embezzling for years and that I had the documents, the reason I moved when I did, to stop further damage. He sank into his chair, stunned. $300,000 through fake vendor accounts, he whispered, incredulous. Why? Gambling debts, I said, mostly sports betting, from what I could tell. The admission left him visibly aged, suddenly seeing both a failing son and a failing company he'd missed. The vulnerability surprised me. I'd expected outrage, not this broken acceptance. We sat in a silence filled with years of missed chances. When he asked again, how did you do it? This time genuinely curious, I answered plainly. I started small, freelance development to build capital, then a proprietary integration platform that solved a common enterprise problem, connecting legacy systems to modern cloud architectures. It was based on the middleware idea I'd pitched it. He recognized the concept, the one he'd dismissed. I'd refined it, used it to win initial clients, reinvested profits, lived frugally, and hired a team who believed in the vision without the Adams name opening doors. Being underestimated is powerful if you know how to use it, I said. He almost smiled, clearly not expecting that. A different silence followed, less hostile. I checked my watch. The press release would go out in 45 minutes. We needed next steps. What about Garrett and Megan? He asked. Garrett would be offered a choice: resign quietly with severance or face potential legal consequences for embezzlement. Megan, I paused, had actually made a reasonable case last night to serve as brand ambassador. Her social media skills could be useful if deployed properly. Dad looked surprised I would keep them involved. This was never about destroying the family, I said. It was about claiming my place in it on my terms. He nodded slowly, eyes on the documents, then looked up with an unexpected directness. You outmaneuvered me, he said. There was a note in his voice that sounded almost like pride. Your grandfather would have been impressed. From him, it was as close to approval as I'd ever get. We shook hands, the first professional agreement between us made as equals. Welcome to Everest Holdings, Dad, I said. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated headquarters of Adams Everest Technologies. The old Adams software building had been transformed. Open workspaces, modern tech, and a collaborative culture that honored the company's history while embracing the future. As CEO of Everest Holdings, I split time between San Francisco and Boston, overseeing integration and product evolution. The transition had been difficult, but it exceeded projections. Dad took his chairman emeritus role with more grace than anyone expected. Once the initial shock faded, he found satisfaction mentoring younger staff and maintaining client relationships. We established a weekly meeting where he shared company history and relationship context, and I found myself looking forward to those sessions. For the first time, we were building a working relationship based on respect instead of unmet expectations. Garrett's situation was messier. After initially threatening legal action, he realized his options were limited. Cooler heads prevailed. He accepted a conditional offer, agreed to repay stolen funds, resigned his executive position, and enrolled in an MBA program if he hoped for any future role. To my surprise, he chose education, and months later, was halfway through his first semester and calling with real questions about business strategy. Megan found a fit as brand ambassador for our consumer products line. Her followers were captivated by her version of events, framed as female empowerment and reconciliation, and her influence opened doors to younger markets we'd struggled to reach. Mom changed the most. She began volunteering with women's education initiatives and joined a tech incubator's board for female founders. "I want to help girls like you," she told me. "Their mothers won't make my mistakes." Walking the office, employees nodded respectfully. I was no longer just Emmy Stone or the forgotten middle child. I was Morgan, CEO, the person who modernized a struggling family company and created new opportunities. My assistant interrupted. Dad was waiting with quarterly reports, and Mom had confirmed dinner with potential investors. I paused at the main lobby timeline, a display tracing atoms from a garage startup to Adam's EVEREST technologies. My photo hung beside my grandfather's and father's, 3 generations of leadership, my achievements listed equally. Thanksgiving came around again, quieter this time, a smaller family dinner, without a performative gratitude ritual or business posturing. No one stormed out, everyone listened. Small victories that mattered. The journey from rejection to leadership had been longer and harder than I'd imagined. Merging family and business required patience and perspective. I was still developing. There were moments when old patterns resurfaced in tense meetings or dinners. Dad still slipped into an authoritarian tone occasionally. I still bristled, expecting dismissal that no longer came. But conversation by conversation, the Adams family formed a new dynamic. One late night reviewing post-merger numbers, he said quietly, "You've already accomplished more than I did in my first decade running this company." That simple, unvarnished acknowledgement healed something I didn't know remained broken. Not because I needed professional validation, but because it signaled the human recognition I'd always wanted. The lesson I kept was this: success alone doesn't heal family wounds. Proving yourself feels good, but it's hollow unless it opens the door to connection. There's a difference between being right and being whole. If this resonates with you, if you've felt invisible or undervalued by the people who should see you most clearly, I hope my story offers both caution and encouragement. Building your own success is powerful, but repairing family relationships takes honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to offer second chances. Have you faced family business challenges? Share your experience in the comments. How did you navigate family and professional roles? Like, subscribe, and share if this hit home. Thanks for witnessing this journey from rejection to reconciliation. Remember, the truest measure of success isn't what you build alone, it's what you create together.